Hey, what's up, guys? Pastor Andrew here, Pastor Gary from Clifton Road, and man, we are kind of been sitting in, some pretty heavy stuff going on over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, me and Pastor Gary wanted to do something today that's a little bit different for our midweek teaching, and man, we wanted to kind of extend a conversation to you guys that we have been having for a year. How long have we known each other?
Man, it's been at least, Mercy Hill's what,
8 years? 8 or 9
years, yeah.
I feel like these conversations have happened throughout, throughout that entire time. And man, I've learned a ton from you, and I know I've told you that, but man, it's just a fact. And I've learned not even just things, but where to go to find things, and stuff to track down. And so, man, we decided, actually on the phone, it was your fault, because you said on the phone the other day, I don't know if you remember this, we're on the phone and you said, this is the conversation we need to have to let people in on, or something like that.
Yeah.
What was your thought on that?
Man, I hear you, bro. Man, first of all, let me just say, man, bro, I appreciate you for saying those words, but man, I feel like God has certainly, man, just sharpened me, man, through our relationship specifically. So I want to make it real clear, like, I say sharpen me, I mean, like, he's grown me in understanding how I have to, man, just not just show compassion, but also like show understanding towards, man, I can't impose my perspective and insight into your life. You know what I'm saying? Like I've had to learn this. I was like, why didn't he get this? And it's like, no, wait a minute. I need to calm down. He's desiring to get this. So I appreciate you for what you said. What you said there. The reason why I think, man, it would be good for us to just open up this, in all honesty, this very vulnerable conversation, because I know, man, this is not, man, we are not experts. We don't have the answers. I'm looking at you all right now because I'm telling y'all, like, this is, man, I'm thankful that you are willing to do this, brother. And I know that this is not an easy thing for especially for you right now. Like, I'll say especially for you, but also, like, I know it's oftentimes very challenging for me. So just let me say that. But I do feel like, man, there are some who need to have these conversations and need to hear these conversations that I care about deeply. And I know that, man, God has given me my experience, and not just me, but, man, given me and the community that has gone into pouring into me and raising me up. They've given me this experience so that I might be able to share it. Yeah. And I think that, man, it's good for us to be able to do that. And you come along, it's like, we've got to do this. We've got to be willing to be vulnerable in this way.
I hear that because, even over the last month, I've talked about, some of the fears that come from messing up, some of the fears that come from saying the wrong thing, and what that can lead to, and it's not healthy. And God's not giving us a spirit of fear. We need to understand He goes before us, behind us. Man, having guys like you and brothers like Pastor Eugene and Ronald and Nico and Lois and Nia and all, man, just kind of coming behind me and saying, like, man, we're with you, we're for you. Right. It matters a lot. But I also think, like, you and I have to be willing to do something like this because we are co-laborers. God has called us as pastors. Gary is an elder pastor at Mercy Hill. And our calling is to model, to be an example to the flock, and to shape them. They are just before God, but we are trying to create a just people. That live into that. And so, so let's just dive into it. We're going to do this over 2 weeks. So we felt like, 25 minutes is maybe not quite adequate to dive into some of these things. So we'll do it for a little while, and then we'll stop, and then we'll come back and jump back in. But man, the first thing that we talked about was just trying to maybe model and open up a little bit on perspective on what's happening in this moment of a flashpoint, but also realizing, man, this has been here before the flashpoint. It's, God forbid, but man, just the reality of the situation, it's going to be here right after the flashpoint. After the news cameras are gone, we're still going to be left trying to figure this all out. Yeah. I would love to just start with you, Gary, and just say, like, man, that's a big question. What's your perspective on all this? But just maybe start there, and I'll jump in where I can and maybe ask more specific questions or whatever.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think oftentimes when I'm thinking about my perspective, it really does depend on what day is it, what moment is it, what week is it, what month is it, what year is it, and just, you think about 2020. 2020 has been a very just, mind-blowing year of change, period. So I think, man, when I think about my perspective, it depends on when you ask me how I'm going to respond to that. Yet I do think that my perspective has obviously, because I'm framing it up in kind of over a course of time, it's shown like a range of emotions over years, decades, where, man, I've been very frustrated about this, very angry, to very apathetic. just kind of throwing my hands up in despair. I've been all over the spectrum. I've been very emotional. I've been very unable to be able to speak on these things. I've been very bitter at times, and this is where I've had to check my heart, and I know that God has grown me in this. But I've grown bitter towards people whom I know that Christ Jesus has shed His blood for, and that's one of the main things that I recognize, man, is in my perspective that I have to keep watch on. I have to keep watch on that in my heart. So I think, man, when I think about my perspective, it's one of those things where it depends on what day it is. But then when I hear the perspectives of so many others, I recognize that, man, this is something that that just makes me want to, man, lament, mourn, in a manner that man causes me to sit at the feet of Jesus and just tell Him what's really in my heart, what's really in my mind, but then also to encourage others to do the same. And I think that right there is what's then going to hopefully help to lead me to showing compassion towards other perspectives that are different from mine. So,
Man, I think you said something there that I feel like is so important for everybody in our social media age. And I'd love to maybe get into that a little bit more, because I remember maybe talking to you, man, it was after the Ahmaud Arbery, it was somewhere with Breonna Taylor, it was, I think it was maybe right before George Floyd. But it was kind of like you in love saying, man, I ain't ready to talk about this right now. Like I love you and I love our church, but like today ain't the day.
right.
Is that okay? I think it's okay, but I'm saying, like, man, can we talk pastorally about giving people the space in a social media age? Oh my, with it's like, if you didn't that, how do we give people the space to say, like, man, it's okay to sit back and allow the Lord to do some work before you.
Right. I think that absolutely, yes. Like where we have to be at as human beings and individuals is at a spot where we can be able to experience our emotions, but then also be able to respond in a way that's truthful. Be angry, but do not sin. See what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like it's saying, like, I'm angry, but now is not the time for me to talk about this right now. Because I feel like if I speak about this right now, it's going to lead me towards doing something that I know God wouldn't intend for me to do.
Right.
So, man, let's follow up on this at a later time. That's the more appropriate way to do it. I think more in relationship. At times, it's just like what I said. Like it's just like, hey, bro, I can't. Talk about
it ain't right today, not today.
Right.
That's
so
fine.
I think that, man, being able to allow God to grow us to the point where we can have that discussion and to be able to share that is absolutely necessary.
Yeah. Man, I think some of the things that we've talked about with perspective that I think are they were very important for me to hear. I'd love for more of our church to hear. Is just like, man, I think that both of us, in terms of being white and black, probably feel like, man, we can kind of assume how the other feels when we see things like this.
Right.
Some of those assumptions are probably pretty accurate, but some of them are just like totally amiss. And I'd love to just say, man, what is it? I don't know. This is. We talk about vulnerable. This is deep, man. But like, what does it feel like, Gary, when you see these things like one after another, specifically within black skin? There is no, there is no such thing as an emotion that's disembodied. Like emotion is all. It comes with being a human that has a culture and a background and a race and a whatever. So, I mean, how do you? What does it feel like?
Yeah, God made us emotional creatures. Bottom line, like He made us emotional people. I think to myself that the way that I respond to this, matter of fact, like, see, this is what, man, like, give me that question one more time, just for a second.
Yeah, just like, man, when you think about as a man, it feels one way. As a black man, it feels a different way, or black woman, or whatever. But all that goes into how you end up.
Exhausting. It's like the greatest temptation to despair that I feel like I could at times have. And I'm not saying it's the greatest one, but it certainly is a temptation to despair. It's tiring. It's like, why do I have to keep explaining myself about this? But the main thing, the primary thing, is just being able to see into that situation in that moment and really to just be able to acknowledge the fact that it could be me. Like, I really do think that's what it boils down to. It's like, I look at that and I think to myself, you think about Ahmaud Arbery, bro, you know me. When you hit me up, I'm out walking around because I got it. Like, bro, I'm missing this gym. COVID-19 got me hurting. So so like, I'm walking around and I hear that somebody's getting shot down in the street just because he's running. It's like, bro, I do that all the time with my kids. You know what I'm saying? So it's like that kind of hits home. And I think that's kind of the primary. The other thing though, and which especially makes it so exhausting is I think that sometimes there's an assumption that people think that there's not outrage when there are, deaths that aren't necessarily like racially charged.
Right.
As if like that's like people are saying that that's okay. So then I've got to like explain that, and it's almost like, man, why are we deflecting from, man, just this
Right.
point? It really boils down to the fact that, man, when I'm thinking about like white on black, and then I'm communicating it to others, I'm feeling like I'm having to justify my reasons as to why this ain't right. And I think that, man, it's very exhausting when you have to continuously do that, even to the point where now I recognize this is a part of the lot. This is the part of my call. Like, I've just got to learn how to navigate this in a way that's going to be healthy and helpful to others. And at times, like I say, I just can't have that conversation. It wasn't necessarily with you. It was just like I just couldn't have the conversation right there. So,
I mean, that is the word. I feel like, from you and others that I've talked to, the word is tired. The word is exhausted, in not only walking through the emotional part of it, which is heightened. And we've talked about this, but the George Floyd video was very, very disturbing to me. Like it is everybody.
Right,
okay, but then what happened for me was, I said, man, I identify with him in a way that other people don't because I'm severely asthmatic. Okay, so I remember when I saw that, I thought there are very few people who understand what it feels like, honest to God, not to be able to breathe. And I'm like, man, I kind of feel a little bit of that. And all of a sudden, I feel like, man, it put me in a little bit of a different emotional state, but never in my mind did I get where you are, where you go. Never did it cross my mind. I was thinking the whole time how awful that would feel like if you were in that situation. I was putting my mind in that situation. Can you imagine how being there? But my mind never had to go to, well, that could be me. Right. That actually could be me. That next jump. And I wonder if that heightens the pain of it. So or makes it more real.
It makes it more real. At the same time, it creates the temptation for, like, I could question, why is it so hard for you to see this?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Why is it so hard for you to experience it? But then it's one of those things where it's like I recognize that at times I tend to try to think. I tend to think that people should like have all of the experience that I've had in my life. As if they've been raised by a woman who was a baby boomer, who by the time she was 25 had seen the death of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, JFK, by the time she was 25. And one of the comments she made then was it seemed like everybody that seems to be trying to do something for black people, they take them out. And it's like, man, that's how I was raised.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like
Right.
that's her perspective, and that's me. So I think to myself, man, I gotta stop, and I gotta recognize I can't give you that. I can tell you that, but I can't give you that. You know what I'm saying? You're not like I respond based on my perspective. I respond based on that reality and that upbringing. But I can't make you get that. And I think that's where I've started to recognize. God grows me to recognize that's the root of bitterness, and I need to watch that. I gotta watch that. So.
And that's the same thing on this side, where you say, I've got to realize that I don't have that, so I've got to be able to hear. There is a balance, though, right? Because, this is very practical, but from what I've seen, many white people decide they want to have that conversation 3 days after George Floyd is killed.
Yeah.
And talk about that. It's like, man, I know you are willing to and want to engage.
Yeah.
But, like, right in this moment, that's a tough thing when everybody's kind of coming at the same time. I mean, it's almost like, man, we should be thinking about these conversations, dripping them over a long time rather than trying to drink out of the fire hose at the flashpoint. Would you agree with that? And if you don't, tell me.
I mean, I think, man, it's one of those things where I think it really goes back to what I said earlier. Like, there will be some who can respond in that type of manner, but there are some who are going to need some time, and I think it's important to communicate that. And it's important also for the people who may be reaching out to the person who is, Black African American at that time, that they understand, like, kind of how that person reacts. So it's one of those things where it's like, the question of, can I approach you? That's a good question, but I think you have to make sure you ask it. You know what I'm saying? Don't allow the potential for the fact that he might say no or she might say no to stop you from asking the question.
Right.
But if it's right, if you've never asked that question and it's right in an intense situation, it might be wise to just let some time pass.
Yeah.
And then follow back up. Just share. Hey man, I'm praying for you. Like
Yeah.
I've gotten so many text messages, and I tell you, man, like the way so many
Very
texts,
meaningful?
very meaningful, very helpful, very encouraging. Just keeps me reminded of the fact that, man, I've got white brothers and sisters who will acknowledge that they can't fully understand this. Yeah, man, they want to go to the mat, they want to pray, and they want to let you know. And I think that that's so important, not just for me, but for man, black people in America, and especially like the church, and especially the families who have been impacted by this. You know, from Floyd to Arbery to Breonna Taylor to everybody else who's seasoned to that and who's experienced what they've experienced. So.
Man, one of our college residents, Nico, he told me, because I've thought this before, where, you know, if someone is not willing to speak or try to reassure or try to speak in, or maybe they're trying to gather their thoughts a little bit. You know, if somebody was to, when something like this happens, and I said this in my midweek teaching, and it's not good, but it's just being honest. Like if somebody says, man, well, where do y'all stand on this?
Right.
A lot of times my first reaction is like, man, how do you not know?
Right.
Okay, like how do you not see through preaching and through and I fully acknowledge, like, man, that's just not the right thing. That's not the right response. That's wrong. And the best analogy I've got of that Nico told me is he basically said, man, you never treat somebody you love that way. When they feel hurt, you never think, well, they know I love them.
Right.
You walk up and touch them.
Yeah.
You know, and that's so really I think that things like that you're saying, that is really, man, my eyes have been really open to that. That during something like this, I've never thought about it a ton, but during something like this that is clearly painful, that it ain't got to be, what are your thoughts on X? It can be, I love you.
I'm here.
And that, man, I'm praying for you. Let me know.
I'm here. Yeah.
I'm learning that, man, and I think that is, I think that's a huge takeaway for me over the last couple. Let me ask you another question, a little deeper with some of this, brother. You said, man, I've gone through frustration, apathy, that kind of thing.
Absolutely, range of emotions.
Right, man. How has having Titus, you know, change? Because I feel like you know, as a young man, there's a lot of social evils, and you kind of. Now you obviously are living one a little, you know, that's a little more close to home, but a lot of other things we're chasing and all that. All of a sudden you have a wife and now Titus is what, 6 years old, 5 years old? You know, 5 years old. What does that do? I mean, how do you?
Yeah, it certainly impacts. I mean, it just changes everything. It changes everything from what how you used to think. You know what I mean? When it was just you and Joy, it was like, man, like, you know, and make sure, like, Titus is my son, Joy is my wife.
Right.
So yeah, make sure y'all know what ones. So when I just got Joy, it's one thing, but then when you introduce Titus, and then when you even introduce, you know, kind of our foster children as well, like, you look at the whole situation, you look at the reality of it, and you start to see, man, especially with Titus, man, I've got to have conversations with him, and I've got to have conversations that are impossible. And I think that it just kind of brings me down to the point where, man, I've got to go to God and be able to share with him the reality of who he is and what his identity is, and really how man, Joy and I, we've had conversations. We said, man, look, there are gonna be people who don't like you just because you're brown. Funny thing, let me tell you how he responded. He said, well, what if I haven't put any lotion on? I'll be ashy. And I'm like, you know, no, bro, like, listen to me, bro, like, yeah, I mean, that, like, he's sitting there trying to reason it out. He be like, and I feel like, man, that's kind of the natural thing. But he's a kid. He's a 5-year-old. At the same time, I know I got to start early, because because man, we live in a culture where, man, this is happening early. And that's very unfortunate, but that's kind of a reality of it. But then also, I think it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier. It could be him. So it's like, man, I've got to learn how to navigate this in a way that's going to be healthy and helpful for him, but also healthy and helpful for others who are around us, so that they know not just how I feel about him, but how I'm training him, and how they should start viewing him. See what I'm saying? I think that's extremely important too. So it's almost like I see a multifaceted perspective. And the thing about it's not just Titus. It's every child that I see, period. there's an especially with me just because I'm a black man and
Right.
I got a black boy.
Right.
So yeah.
Man, I think about that too with, because my kids are old enough now where they start to understand some of these things, and they're trying to figure out how all of this stuff fits together. When we see racism in our country, or when we see the effects of it that are hard, it's hard to get behind and connect a bunch of dots, but you can clearly see there's an effect here that is super disproportionate and really painful. And I've learned that as a pastor, I mean, man, I do words for a living, but when I'm sitting around the kitchen table over breakfast and trying to tell my children what is happening on the news and what's happening in our country, I feel all of a sudden like, man, I don't know what to say. It's like,
Right.
I'm all of a sudden caught. I don't know exactly what to say.
Yeah.
I don't want to tell them this is the way the world is. And I do praise God for His grace that they have not experienced some of the things yet, that I'm getting a chance to frame that narrative for them.
Absolutely.
In a lot of ways at their age. Now, that ain't going to be true forever.
Right.
Because it's just the world we live in. They're going to
find other
Right.
sources of authority.
Right.
Yeah.
But trying to shape that, man, I just know it's something that, man, I don't know if any of us are going to get it right. And I'm talking about on the white side, but I'm saying but I know that I know a lot of people at Mercy Hill, a lot of families at Mercy Hill are trying to figure out how to take a swing at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we need to be able to try.
And just let me follow back up on that.
Yeah.
I think one thing, make sure it's clear that that's not uncommon to you. Like
Right.
that conversation is hard to have, and it's going to continue to be hard to have. And don't just take everything that you hear from people to be what it should be. Like you need to analyze this according to God's word as well.
Right.
So I say all of that just to basically say like man, it's not an uncommon thing. It's a challenge for all of us. But I do think that, man, being able to kind of share and be in a community with a community of parents is very
Yes.
helpful towards doing that. So.
Man, and I think that's one of the beauties of trying to build a diverse church.
Absolutely, which that is a direct link
Right.
to, like, people ask, man, what are we doing in order to fight justice? You take a look at our kids ministry. You know what I'm saying? You take a look at the community of parents that we are aiming to equip to be able to raise up their disciples to love Jesus and to have fun and to take the gospel to the nations.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were crafting that language earlier, thinking about like, man, the primary, and we're gonna get into actions. We're not doing that this week. We'll do that next week. But thinking about actions is like, man, a primary action for the church is creating, to fight injustice is creating a just people, and we, doing that through conversations with them all the way, shaping the arrows from early on. Man, let's extend this a little more. Let's get into a little more of these. I'd love to shift gears a little bit and start talking about some of, maybe not all, but some of the spiritual, just in general, the responses that the Bible gives up. If I can take a minute, I'll just set this up. I think for us, a lot of times immediately the conversation starts to go toward trying to connect historical dots and getting into paradigms of the way of looking at society and oppression, whether that be economic, whether that be racial, whatever it is. Man, you know this about me. I feel like that's a very valuable conversation.
Absolutely.
I also think every one of us, and this may rub different people the wrong way, I don't know, have got to walk humbly with that conversation.
Absolutely.
Because it's a tough and complex thing.
It is.
What is not very tough and complex is that the Bible, I think, for every human in all of history and going forward through history, the Bible understands that oppression and pain and brokenness, things like racism, whether individual or whether baked in, is going to be something that we face with a sinful heart. And it has given us mechanisms to have the proper response. And by response, I don't mean, and we are not talking quite yet about like what to go do.
Right.
No more spectators, civic action, all that. This is more the heart posture and what we...
Yeah. How do we process this?
I think what would be good for people to hear is the way that you differentiate those things, because even for me, that's been really good for me to hear you talk about response versus like the action.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the thing that I'm really working with now is that when I think about responses and I think about what I'm referring to as meaningful action, like now in this present age, trying to see the kingdom of God ushered in. That's kind of a category in itself. when I think about responses, there's a bit of a distinction there, because I do think that the Bible is really informing us as to how we are to, quote unquote, respond to this. Another way to say that is how we should process this. How do we process seeing what we saw happen to George Floyd? You know what I mean? How do we process that in a way that's going to be helpful and healthy, not destructive and hurtful? And I think that part of the overall arching response that we all, I think, can take according to God's word is being able to learn how to lament to the point where we crave justice, to then it leading us to meaningful action. See what I'm saying? Now, I know that's kind of a long, but I think we're not even thinking about lamenting in the category in which it should be. I think we're thinking that lamenting is basically losing your cool. You know what I'm saying? We're thinking of lamenting as acting like outraged to the point of just losing all control. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's necessarily like losing control is necessarily just like wrong in and of itself. You know what I'm saying? Unless you're doing it to the point where it's like being taken out towards a person. That's where you gotta rewind. And I think that when I think about responses, I'm thinking, man, we've got to learn how to lament, sit in the emotions, sit in the hurt, sit in the wrongness of it, sit in the evil of it, recognizing that this offense has been committed not just against mankind, but ultimately against the Most High God. See, like really like sitting in this, and not spouting off, not asking questions, not trying to get justifications. We've got to learn how to sit in this so that it hurts to the point where we don't want to experience this no more. To the point that then like really helps us to see, yeah, I'm not just going to talk about it. I'm about to be about it. Yeah. And I have no choice but to do that. I have to do that because of what Christ Jesus has done for me. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like man, it's crazy. Like
I've heard you use the term. Man, we'll. This is more of. Let's kick off. Let's use this to end and kick off and we'll start here when we start next week.
Absolutely.
But like you've talked about like a mourningful response. Like there is something in the mourning and groaning that produces the willingness to want to go after bringing signs of the kingdom.
Yeah.
Going after praying God's hand down to change these things. If we're not broken up about it, we won't be about it.
Exactly.
And so we've got to have that moment. Man, when you think about lament. You know, what's I know we're going to talk about scriptures later, but what's some of the go-to places? I mean, I think about a lot of the Psalms.
Absolutely.
I know you've talked a lot about that.
Yeah. The spectrum of emotions in humanity is expressed throughout the Psalms. If you're not reading the Psalms on a regular basis, I would certainly encourage you to do so. The Psalms basically expresses every type of emotion, and it's crazy. It's almost like sometimes you see things that are written in the Psalm, you're like, is that right to say? And you recognize, before God it is.
Before God, yeah.
Yeah. It's certainly.
Because you said this, it's not losing control in a self-control way.
Right.
But you read the Psalms, it feels like David has let himself go before the Lord.
Yeah.
You know, in a way that's.
He's expressed his vulnerability before the one who truly knows him at the core.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's one of those things where it's like, tell God what he already knows.
Right.
You know what I mean? Tell the truth. Don't try to sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
And I think that's extremely important for us to do as far as we respond. Another great place to go is Lamentations. I mean, it kind of lays it out for you. Like, man, this is what it is. At the same time, this is what it's reminding me of about God, and this is how I'm able to continue to have strength and hope. So I think, man, that's important.
Yeah.
Another opportunity. There's so many.
Yeah, man. Okay. I think next week I want to pick up right there with the response because we had talked about lament, anger, and longing.
Absolutely.
And we need to continue that conversation. But we will do that, man. We try to keep these midweeks around half an hour.
Yeah.
Gary, I appreciate you, man. And we'll take a break and then we'll come right back next week.
Sounds good.